Real estate investment practice problem using Excel. Excel amortization schedule with table and slicer. Get ready because it's time to raise the stakes with real estate. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that there are two tabs on down below, example tab, practice tab. Let's take a look at the example tab quickly, which is in essence the answer key. This is what we will be creating. We have the information here being our amortization table, very similar to our prior practice problem. However, this time we'll be constructing it looking to add a table to it, a table that we can then use and add a splitter to, or a slicer, as we see on the right hand side here, allowing us to break down the information by a year format. Gonna filter out that, and then we'll use that slicer to create our year information for the 30 time periods, which will be a little bit faster possibly than the prior presentation without the table format. Let's go back to the practice tab and we'll start to construct this. Now, when we create the amortization table, I'll do it a lot faster here. So if you want to take it slowly, look at a prior presentation. We're going to focus in mainly on the header here, which will be a little bit different because we want to put it together in such a way that we're looking to add a table to it. So that means that we're going to have our headers up top, same headers, but this time I'm not going to use two rows, but instead use the wrap function so that when I add the table, it will not mess up the table. If I have two rows or multiple rows and then I add a table, it will not pick up the rows properly. So I'm going to scroll up top and we're going to say we'll have the years as the first one. We have months, same format as with our prior layout. Payments, we're going to say payments, and then interest. And here's the one that's going to be a little bit longer. This is going to be loan reduction. And I'm going to say tab. Notice it's hanging over here in the next cell. I'm okay with that. I'm going to just type on over it, loan balance. And then I'm going to format these cells, selecting these cells with our headers in it. We're going to go up top, home tab. We could go to alignment and wrap the text. Wrapping the text. This one's still a little bit long over here, so we might then select these cells and make it a little bit longer so we have the information necessary in the cells. And then I'm going to make it black and white and center it again. So I'm going to select these items again, home tab, alignment, center them. I like to make it then black and white on the headers. So we're going to select a bucket, black, and then the text white so it stands out as the header. Then we're going to add the months. So the same way that we did in the prior presentation, I'm going to go a little bit faster here, 0, 1, 2. We're going to select that series of cells, put our cursor on the fill handle, drag it all the way down to 360 spaces, as we can see with that little indicator. There's the 360. Going to center that by going to the alignment and center it. Looks good. We're going to add the years. Now I'm going to put a 0 year, and then I'm going to start in year 1. And I'd like everything in year 1 to have a number for it. Now remember, when you say the years, you might say, hey, look, maybe I just want one here, and then year 2 starts down here. You don't want to do that when you add a table because you want each row to be indicating something in it. So I want to indicate that every month is in year 1. That's going to be necessary if I'm going to use the splitter properly or the slicer, and it'll be more necessary when I go to the implication next time, which we'll work on, which is the pivot table. So instead, I'm going to say 1. I'm going to use my round function and do this little tricky formula here. We're going to say this is going to be equal to round down. Round down. We used this last time, so I'm going to go a little quicker here. Double click in the round down. I'm going to go 1 year down, 12 months, divided by 12. That'll give us 1 because we're in year 1. However, I need to also say comma and put the second argument saying I want you to round it to the one whole number. To do that, I'm going to put a 0 there. So comma 0. There's our formula. Enter. If I then select that item and drag it down, I should get, when I get to 13, it should go to number 2. So these are all 12 payments in year 1, and then we have year 2 here. Looks like it's doing what we want. I'm going to double click on this. That'll take it all the way down. So we're going to put our cursor on the fill handle, double click on it, brings it all the way down. I'm going to drag down to their last item down here. We have that little thing in the 30s. I need to make sure that these populate as 30 because this is beyond our data set. So this last little bit, I'm going to delete what's in there and do this last little trick, which is equals the one above it. So all these cells are going to equal the one above it when I drag it down, or I could simply double click on the fill handle. There we have that. Going to scroll all the way back up to the top. That looks good. Let's go ahead and select the entire column, center it, alignment, center, payments. And so nothing's going to be in the payments for 0, period 0. This didn't center. I uncentered it. Let's center it again. There we go. But I want to put something in there because every cell should have something in it when you deal with pivot tables or any kind of table generally. So I'm going to put a 0 in these items and a 0 here. I'm going to start with the loan balance. Loan balance we're going to pull from our table just as we saw with the prior practice problem. This is going to equal the loan balance of the 400,000. And then enter. We'll calculate the payments, which are going to be equal to the payment of that 2147.29. This is outside of our table. Therefore, we want to make it absolute. Pressing F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and the 9. You only need a mixed reference, but an absolute one works. Tab. Notice that we don't have any pennies here, no cents. So we're not going to add cents here because I think that'll make it a little bit easier to see without all the pennies cluttering up our worksheet. So this is going to be equal then the 400,000 times the rate, which is 5%, remembering that that rate is a yearly rate, so we're going to have to divide by 12. Also noting that 5% is outside of our table in the data set. Therefore, we need to make it absolute because when I copy it down, I don't want that cell to move down. F4 on the keyboard, $ before the B and the 7, then dividing by 12, tab, and hold on, something funny happened. Dividing not by 2, but by 12. There we have it. Then we'll have the loan reduction. This is going to be equal to the payment minus the interest. No absolute reference necessary because we want this to move on down as we copy it down. And then the loan balance is going to be equal to the prior balance, the 400,000 minus the loan reduction of the 481. There we have it. So then I'm going to select those 4 cells and I want to autofill it all the way down, hoping that I've got the absolute reference correct, so it'll just copy down properly. I'm just going to double click here. And there we have it. Let's scroll all the way down to the bottom and double check that it ends up at 0 at the bottom, which it should. So there it is. It ends up at 0. That's kind of our double check number. Now, instead of adding the total column, as we did last time, we're going to make this into a table. So if I scroll all the way back up, making a table is easy to do generally, and it kind of locks in the cells. So if you're going to be manipulating the cells around, tables can be quite useful. All we do is make sure we got our cursor somewhere in the data set. Notice I have no blank cells. I'm not going to select multiple cells, but just beyond one cell. I don't need to select the entire table, but I could. I'm just going to put my cursor on one cell in the data set, then go to the Insert tab up top. We're going to be in the Tables group and just simply add the table, and there it goes. And now notice it picks up the data set for us, and it will pick up the proper data set as long as I only have one cell highlighted, and as long as my headers are in there properly, meaning I don't have multiple cells in the header up top as well. So then I'm going to say OK, and it implements the table. Now note you have over here your different options for the table. You have the table design tab up top has been added. So if you're on the table, you'll have this table design. So if I'm off the table, notice that thing went away. On the table, there's our table design tab, which comes back into play. You can then change your table design if you so choose, if you want a different kind of format of the table and so on. Let's just choose this. I'm going to put our classic blue. So you could color it your own way. In other words, if I scroll this whole thing down and I want to make it our blue color by going to the Home tab and then go into the Font group, Bucket, there's my blue. If it's not there, you go to the More Colors, Standard, Set a Custom, and there's that blue right there. That's the one, and Enter. And then we'll put the brackets around it, Home tab, Font group, drop down all borders, and there's our kind of format. And now you got our drop down headers up top and whatnot on our data. Also note that these two items, they extended it so that it's wide enough to fit the two. If you want to then squish those back down, it should round them. So if I select these two columns, put my cursor in the middle of them and drag to the left, it will then do that wrapping thing. So it still does the wrap for us there. Notice there's a lot of space up top. Sometimes if you double click this row, it'll close it up as tight as it can get. And so you don't have too much space, although you still kind of have this gap right here due to the wrapped text nature that we have. Now, if we go all the way down to the bottom of the table, you'll notice we don't have any totals down here. If I click on the table, I could add the totals by going to the table design and say I would like a total row, adding a total row, and it just adds one for us. It automatically did the sum. I don't really want a total over here, though. I'm going to delete that. I'd like a total in this column. I'm going to make that with a drop down here, drop down, and just sum. So instead of me entering the formula, I just use the little drop down and say I'd like to sum this one up, and this one I'd like to sum this one up, and there's our totals. So they look good. If I put my check numbers to check if that's correct, I'm going to say this equals, I'm going to scroll all the way up. Total payments we calculated here, you'll recall. The interest we calculated, scrolling all the way up right there. They look the same, so everything looks proper. And then the loan balance we calculated right there. So they look like they line up to the check numbers. Notice I didn't put the check numbers right up against the table, because if I do that, it might think that it's a part of the table. I don't want the check numbers to be part of the table, so I put them a step down. Now, the thing that's nice about the tables, once you have the tables in place, notice this is not a pivot table. You could then add a pivot table, and we'll do that in a following presentation. But now that you have the table here, you can add the slicer, and the slicer can break down this information on a year-by-year basis a little bit easier. So to do that, we can go to the table design up top, and then in the tools group, we have this slicer. So we hit the slicer, and then there we have it. Now that we could slice up by years, month, payment, interest, and loan reduction, and so on. It's probably most common to slice it by the years here. So if we want to slice it by the years, then notice I've got 1 through 30 years. So instead of having 360 payments, I can look at it on a year-by-year basis, choosing, say, year 1. And then I just have the year 1 totals and our totals down here for year 1. We can obviously go to year 2 and so on, and we get this nice year-by-year breakout. So that's a nice thing to do. However, my data is still kind of, I can only see that one at a time. I might still want my table that is going to be breaking out by year, 30 years, and then have my information by year. Now, you could do that fairly easily by building a table and using this slicer to do it. It's still a lot slower than a pivot table, but it's still fairly easy to do. So I'll just show you how we can construct that fairly quickly here. And so I need to put it down. I'm going to put my table down below this table to start with, and then I'm going to move it to the right. Because if I start it in the right, every time I hit the slicer, it actually limits the number of columns I can see. So if I'm trying to take this sliced information and put it somewhere else, it's got to be somewhere below the table so that it doesn't get sliced, so the columns don't get sliced up when I'm trying to add the data. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go below the table, and we're going to add our data. It's going to be, we're going to say year. Let's put the year here. Year, and then we're going to have payments, and then we got the interest. And then I'm going to say loan reduction. I'm going to shorten it right for loan reduction per year. And then the balance. And I'm going to select those cells. We're going to go to the Home tab up top. Font group. Let's make this into black and white. Let's center it. Alignment group and center. There's going to be 30 years. I'm just going to start at 1, 2, and then bring it down to 30-year loan. Put in our cursor on the fill handle, drag it on down to 30. That's way too far. I felt like I'm going down to 360 again, but no, just 30 this time. That's all we need. And then alignment and center, so there we have that. And then we could basically break out our information by going by year 1. And there's my information right here. Now I can't say equals this number because that data will change as I change the table. So if I was to do that when I go to year 2, let's do that again. If I go to year 1 here and I do it for the interest, there we have it. And then if I went to year 2, see my interest change. So I can't do that. I would have to basically copy and paste the information. So I'm going to copy this in year 1. So I'm in year 1. I'm just going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3, right click and paste 1, 2, 3. And so that'll give us the information. And then on this first one, I'm going to take the loan balance too and copy that. And I'm going to paste it 1, 2, 3, just the values. So these are kind of hard coded in there. So it's not a perfect system here because we don't have formulas drawing this data in. But you can build this table. When you change the data set on the left-hand side, the problem with this method is these numbers will not change with the data set change. When we do the pivot tables, you'll have a little bit more flexibility. We'll work on that next time. Let's go to 2. I'll just do this all the way down and say now the second ones. I'm going to copy these. I'm going to paste them here. 1, 2, 3. Paste 1, 2, 3. The loan balance, we could do a running balance, which will simply be equal to the prior balance minus the loan reduction for the year. That'll give us our new loan balance. And then we'll just do this all the way down. Year 3, we're going to select these items, right click, copy. We're going to paste 1, 2, 3. Year 4, we'll select these items, right click and copy. And then I'm going to paste it down here, 1, 2, 3, values only. I'll get to the balances later. Year 5, selecting these items, copy. And then pasting it right here, 1, 2, 3. And then 6, we're going to select these items, copy, put that down here in 6, and repeat this process 30 times, bit tedious, but we'll go through there and then I'll add the loan balances. So there we have it. I've done it to 30 times here. And then we could just drag down this loan balance, and the loan balance at the end should be 0 again on a year by year. So if I take the prior balance minus the loan reduction, and then copy that all the way down, or simply put our cursor on the fill handle, double click, that'll take it all the way down to the bottom. It comes to 0, so it looks like it is doing it properly. If we have our check numbers, let's give our totals down here. Totals equals the SUM, summing this up. Summing it up like so, and I'll copy that across. Copying this across. And then we've got our check numbers, which are going to be equal to these same check numbers we had up here. Looks like they check out properly. So I'll copy those across. And then just format, we'll just format these. Let's make our blue formatting. Selecting these items, font group, putting borders around it, bucket, making it blue. We may want an underline down here. We may want to underline that, font group and underline. Let's do the same blues thing here. Font group, make it blue, and there we have it. Now, if we want this data on a side-by-side, I could then unfilter, go all the way down to our data, and you want to make sure it's unfiltered so that you have all the rows on this side. And then I'm going to move this over to the side. So I can't copy and paste it. I have to cut and paste it. So I'm going to select this whole thing. And then I'm going to cut it, which is the same as kind of dragging it over there. I'm going to right click and cut it, not copy it, but cut it. And then when I move up top, I could put it, I'm going to make this cell a little bit larger, so that it clears the fill handle. And then let's make this one then. Well, let's do it this way. Let's do it. Here we're going to make this one a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to put it right there on L, right click, and then we'll paste it. So now all the data got moved, and any kind of references should move along with it. And so this is what I mean, like if you use this splitter, the problem with this splitter, the splitter's nice, but it messes up anything to the right of it because it's gonna restrict your cells. So if I was going down to 4 down here, you can see I've wiped out the stuff to the right because what it did was basically find just the rows that are relevant to the year 4 items. So you can see that that deletes the data to the right. So the slicer, I should say, not the splitter, the slicer is nice, and it's a nice tool to have, and it can give us that breakdown. I could change my data on this side. If I was to change this to like 6% to like, 2% or something like that, my amortization table would change and my slicer would work beautifully. However, the data to the right would not work because we used the slicer and we had to hard code the number. These numbers would not change. Bringing that back to 5%. So that's a good tool to have. That's another kind of tool, but you have to use a table to do that, and the slicer gets a little bit fancy of use. Next time, we'll do a similar thing, and then we'll use pivot tables, which is often quite intimidating for people to use the pivot tables, but they can give us some more options as well to break out this information nicely.